Hello everyone, Just Podcast TV is here. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified on new contents.
Episode 308. Daryl. Susie was shot, and who didn't know? Zach immediately gave the address to Donnie. He didn't want to board the plane anymore, so he turned around and drove straight to the airport. If it was just a small matter, Felicity definitely wouldn't have sent a message. In fact, it was true. No one answered Zach's call. No one answered. This naturally proved that Susie was no longer capable of answering. This made Zach very angry. He did not know who was so bold as to dare touch his woman. But what made him even angrier was, what did Felicity do? What did he send her there for? Susie was actually shot. Trash. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Zach called Carson, indicating that he had an urgent matter to attend to. Fortunately, this wasn't something that he had to go approve personally. It was the unveiling of a prototype car. It could wait. However, he could not care about that anymore. Zach only wanted to make sure that Susie was safe. He could not allow anything to happen to her. If that was really the case, he was afraid that he would make the old fox sad. Whoever touched Susie, he had to return the injustice to them. The car sped along. At around 8 o'clock at night, Zach rushed to the hospital where Susie was at. Although she was still in the ICU, it was fortunate that she had already been rescued and was currently stable. The place where she was shot was in the back, close to her spine. It was slightly slanted and did not hit her heart, which was why Susie was still alive. Had it been any closer, then she would have died on the street. When he arrived at the hospital, Zach saw Felicity, who had a timid expression on her face. She lowered her head and did not even dare to look at Zach. If she raised her head, Zach would definitely slap her. But now that she had lowered her head, Zach really didn't have the mood to lift her chin and slap her. After entering the ICU, Zach saw Susie, who was still unconscious. She was still as beautiful as before, but her face was pale. The ventilator beside her was still working. Luckily, the electrocardiogram was beating evenly, which made Zach feel relieved. Zach caressed Susie's face, then stood up and left. When he was passing by Felicity, Zach asked Donnie, "Ask her why Susie was shot and who did it." Felicity was a mute. Zach did not want to waste so much time talking to her on her phone later. After leaving the ICU, Zach went to the doctor. The doctor was very professional. He did not rest, even though it was so late. He was still studying the patient's medical report. When he found out about Zach's intention, the doctor said that she was fine. Although it was dangerous, it did not cause much harm and would not affect her in the future. If there were no problems with inflammation, she could stay for 10 days or half a month after waking up and then go home to rest. After expressing his thanks to the doctor again and again, Zach returned to the ward. At this time, Donnie had already asked Felicity about everything that had happened. The one who did it was a famous underground organization in the neighboring city. They wanted to cross the border to sell Susie's business, but Susie beat them back. Later, they decided to discuss cooperation with Susie, but Susie rejected them. This time, they secretly shipped the goods and wanted to take the goods from under Susie's nose, but in the end, Susie directly called the police. The people and the henchmen who were in charge of transporting the goods were all taken care of by the police. So this organization really carried out a premeditated revenge. The leader of this organization is called Daryl. He's almost 50 this year. He used to be an old hooligan, but now he's rich. Donnie only knew this much for the time being, but this was still enough for Zach to do his job. Bring the man and the GTR over, and bring Daryl back to me. Remember, I want him alive. Donnie nodded his head happily. At this time, Zach clenched his fists tightly. He wanted to see what kind of lowlife would be so bold as to harm one of his friends. Sitting in front of the bed, Zach ignored Felicity who was standing beside him. Felicity did not dare to make a sound, and just stood there obediently. She felt very guilty. It was not only because she failed to live up to Zach's trust, but also because she felt guilty towards Susie. Susie treated her like a biological sister, but she did not protect this big sister of hers. She felt very uneasy in her heart. After accompanying her in silence for more than half an hour, Susie finally woke up. When she saw Zach, whose face was filled with anxiety and concern, Susie asked powerlessly, "Why are you here?" "You're already like this. How can I not come?" "Susie, lie down and recuperate well. I'll take care of Daryl Pay." Zach knew that Daryl was the perpetrator behind this attack, and he would suffer dearly for it. Susie turned her head and looked at Felicity, whose face was filled with guilt. She endured the pain, and a smile appeared on her face. "Felicity, it's not your fault. When you went to the bathroom, someone came over and shot me in the back. I can't not let you go to the bathroom. I really can't blame you for this." Susie was trying to persuade Felicity not to blame herself. She was also pleading with Zach not to make things difficult for Felicity. When she turned her pleading gaze to Zach, Zach could only nod when he saw her current state. After that, he said to Felicity, "It's not your fault. Go back and rest. I'll accompany Susie tonight." Felicity waved her hand repeatedly to indicate that she would stand guard at the door of the ward so that Susie would be safe. Since she insisted on doing so, Zach let her do as she pleased. After accompanying Susie for a half a night in the hospital, Zach fell asleep on Susie's bed in the later half of the night. When he woke up in the next morning, it was the nurse who woke him up and did not treat him well. "You are better off staying with the little sister outside than staying with her. She has been sitting all night and did not even go to the bathroom." She didn't even go to the bathroom? Felicity must be thinking about how she got shot when she went to the bathroom, so she didn't dare to leave. Susie also woke up at this time. She looked at Zach, and Zach understood. He then went out to look for Felicity. "Go and eat something. Then come to the hospital bed in the ward and rest. I don't blame you for what happened this time, but if there was a next time, you better be more than ready." After a series of persuasion and intimidation, Zach fiercely ordered Felicity to eat breakfast. However, he noticed that after Felicity got up, she immediately went to the bathroom. He stayed with Susie in the ICU for 2 days before she was transferred to the special care unit to recuperate. The so-called special care unit, naturally the more money was given, the more meticulous the care would be. It would also be more comfortable and convenient for the accompanying staff to rest. In the past 2 days, many of Susie's subordinates had come, but the police had also come. After all, it was a gunshot wound. Whether it was a gunshot wound or a knife wound, these were things that the hospital needed to call the police. This had nothing to do with whether the patient had money or not. However, Susie clearly already had a way to deal with this. She insisted that she did not know why she had been shot. She had no enemies, and neither had she offended anyone. Although the police had already filed a case, it was only limited to the investigation of the surveillance cameras. However, the surveillance cameras at the scene of the gunshot were still broken. However, the police comrades were already doing their best to solve the case. This was something worthy of respect. Less than half an hour after the police left, Zach saw Donnie, who had returned to the hospital. "Boss, Daryl has been brought back." Zach told Felicity to stay and take care of Susie while he went to see Daryl under Donnie's lead. He had to meet the boss of the neighboring city. What kind of courage did he have to make someone dare to shoot at his woman? Episode 309, Humanoid Beast. Zach saw Daryl in the abandoned warehouse. Daryl was close to 50 years old, but he looked quite strong. He had tattoos of dragons and tigers on his body, and he had a ferocious look on his face, especially the diagonal scar on the left side of his right eye, which was above the left corner of his mouth, which added a lot of ferociousness. You guys are quite arrogant. You even dare to let me see your appearance? Aren't you afraid I will kill you after I get out? Zack heard Daryl's words as soon as he entered the warehouse. However, Zack saw the man's arm was wrapped in bandages. He said, "Is his injury serious?" The man waved his hand. "It's nothing, boss. It was just a little kid who used a knife to cut his arm." Zack smiled and patted the man's shoulder. He then took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it up. When he came to the front and back of Daryl, who was tied to a pillar, Zack asked him, "Why were you so nosy when you entered?" Daryl was really brave. Even though he was tied up, he didn't show any signs of fear. A ferocious smile blossomed on his face. "I say, you few are quite arrogant. How dare you show your faces to me and let me see you?" Zack made an "oh" sound, and then pointed at the running man and asked, "Did you hear what he said just now?" Of course, Daryl could hear what Zack said, but he didn't know what Zack meant. Seeing Daryl in a daze, Zack asked calmly, "He said, your injury wasn't even that bad, which is surprising because you are such a big man. Surely having a small kid cut your arm hurts your ego more than your body, right? Also, I'm not sure I'll let you leave here alive anyway." Hearing this, Daryl was no longer as arrogant as before. He was stunned for a moment. But then he laughed out loudly and said, "Then kill me. What's the point of talking nonsense with me? When I come out to mingle, I have already made my peace with this world. I've done what I've wanted. Why should I care if it were to end today or tomorrow?" Zack nodded. "Looks like you really aren't afraid of death." Daryl laughed dryly. "If I were afraid of death, then I wouldn't commit a crime." Zack thought for a while and said, "All right, since you're not afraid of death, then I won't kill you. Humans are not afraid of death, but they are afraid of pain." How could Daryl understand this? "If you want to kill me, I'll cut you into pieces. Don't try to be rude to me." Zack turned his head inside to Donnie. Look. This is what a tough man looks like. This is what a big man looks like. He really isn't afraid of death. I really admire him. In order to show respect to him, Donnie, go and take out the things hidden in the place where the spare tire in your car is." Donnie was stunned. "Boss," he said, "when did you go and explore that space? Hurry up and get it. How can I not know what you brought with you?" Donnie was almost kicked in the butt by Zack. He quickly walked towards his SUV. Zack turned his head to look at Daryl. "I'll open my eyes for you later. I guarantee you that I have never played such an exciting game." It was brought back after crossing the border. Daryl was also quite curious about what the thing was. It was not his curiosity that made him feel uncomfortable. Thus, he said, "Brother, I'm not in a place to bargain for my life. Can I at least have a cigarette?" Zack replied, "You know that cigarettes have the effect of calming one's mind, right? Don't think about it anymore. I won't give it to you, and I'm not going to let you go on your way. You acted so arrogantly just now. If I let you go on your way now, wouldn't I be disrespecting you?" After his thoughts were exposed, Daryl sneered. It seems that I have a lot of hatred for you. You can refuse to give me the cigarette, but you have to let me understand the enmity between us, right?" Zack nodded. "You can have this. Susie. She's mine. Do you understand?" Only then did Daryl understand why he had been kidnapped. Thus he laughed loudly. "That's not unfair. I got someone to shoot Susie. Her brother wanted to kill me. It's not unfair." Zack took a puff of his cigarette. "You're quite open-minded." "That's of course. Being in the underworld all year round, who can't take care of this small matter? When I was in primary school, I knew that if I wanted to beat someone up, I had to be prepared to be beaten up. But that Susie is really nothing. She doesn't earn money, and she hasn't earned a bit of what she has. I advise you not to work with Susie. We'll work together, and I guarantee that you'll earn a lot of money. You'll get whatever you want. Daryl might be able to argue with him, but it was nothing more than one thing for Zach to let him go. However, he didn't say it out loud. This showed that he wasn't afraid of death, but at the same time, he also won his own safety. Zach promised, "Daryl, your language skills are really awesome. I admire you. However, I still want to test your courage and firmness. If you are really brave and strong-willed, perhaps I really will cooperate with you." Daryl laughed dryly. "Ha! All right then. You can do it. Let's see whether your fist is hard or your body is hard." "First," Zach sneered, as if he was looking at an idiot. "You wish." At this time, Donnie also came back from outside with a machine gun in his hand. Holding the small portable machine gun in his hand, Zach checked the magazine and made an introduction. MP7 machine gun, a self-defense weapon. It has little recoil, high accuracy, and excellent performance. It's also easy to carry, so today, I'll play with this. Then I'll use this to compare with you, whether it's your bones or the bullets that are stronger. Daryl's eyes widened. The fear began to appear in his eyes. It wasn't that he had never seen a gun before, or else Susie wouldn't have been shot in the back. He saw the bullets inside. They were all real. So now he was really afraid. He did not know that Zach was holding a machine gun. What did he want to do? But in the next moment, Zach made him fully understand what he wanted to do. "Turn on the phone camera. Let's record a video for him and let him become famous in the underworld. He will be a popular person in the underworld." Episode 310, Torture. Seeing Zach coming over with a machine gun in his hand, Daryl felt a little scared. "No, what are you doing?" Zach smiled. "What are you afraid of? If I don't kill you? Besides, weren't you tough just now? Hold on." Zach flipped the safety off and pointed the gun at Daryl's knee. Then he said to the gangster, who had taken out his phone, "We've recorded it. We still have to make Daryl an internet celebrity." The gangster gave him a thumbs up. "Don't worry, boss. I guarantee that he'll be very famous once this goes online." Daryl wasn't a fool. He understood what he meant. This was not to record Zach. Brother, you can't do this. Brother, what I told you just now was true." He didn't give Daryl the chance to speak at all. Zach pulled the trigger and fired a series of shots. Daryl had gone crazy from the pain. The entire abandoned warehouse was filled with the sound of screams. After unloading the empty magazine, Zach asked Daryl as he changed the magazine, "Weren't you a bull-faced man just now? What are you snorting about now?" Daryl's dry eyes were filled with blood. He couldn't answer Zach's question. He lowered his head and looked down at his leg. His knee had been broken, and half of his leg was hanging off. He tried to move his toe, but found that he couldn't control it at all. His right leg was completely numb from the knee down. Under the burning of anger, his fear was reduced by a lot. "If you have the ability, kill me! Kill me!" Many a time, death was not the most terrifying thing, especially when one was filled with anger. It was precisely because Zach had realized this point that he had never thought of killing Daryl. After loading the magazine, he continued to point the muzzle at Daryl's right knee, which was burning with blood and torn flesh. "When you sent people to kill Susie, you should have thought that this day would come. If you didn't think about it, then you can't blame me." After he spoke calmly, the crisp sound of gunfire rang out once again. While Daryl let out a dry howl of pain, his entire body was struggling non-stop. However, Donnie and the other two were professionals, so they definitely passed the binding method for binding buttons. After another round of bullets, Zach threw the empty magazine to Donnie, and at the same time, took the new magazine that was filled with bullets. At this moment, Daryl was shouting so loudly that his throat was hoarse. He even felt the smell of blood in his throat. Zach asked him, "Is there anything else you want to say?" Daryl was just about to say something when Zach replied, "Sorry, I didn't want to hear it even if you wanted to say it." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of gunfire rang out once again. This time, Daryl did not feel any more intense pain, and Zach also did not finish firing a magazine of bullets. The reason was very simple. There was an extra half of his leg on the ground, and inside was a white bone fragment. "Guess what I'm going to do?" When Zach put on a new magazine, the muzzle of the gun was pointed at Daryl's left knee. He asked with a smile, "Have you guessed it yet?" Daryl had already realized what Zach was going to do. Zach was going to cripple him and make him not qualified to stand up again. He felt afraid. He had killed people before and had also chopped people up before. He had even thought more than once that he would be killed by someone, but he had never thought that he would be tortured in such a way. He had never thought that. That was why he began to feel afraid. Only then did he understand the most terrifying thing was the unknown. And Zach did not give him any more chances to speak. He pulled the trigger. Daryl's remaining leg erupted with blood, and below the knee was separated, and on the floor, Zach tossed the gun to Donnie. He lit another cigarette on the ground and looked at Daryl, who was tied to a pillar with two broken legs, but had already fallen to the ground. "I, Zach, will never bully someone I shouldn't bully, nor will I take the initiative to bully someone who is inferior to me. No matter how I think about it, you should meet these two conditions. But you have warranted a special reaction from me. How dare you send someone to shoot my people in the back? Those are my people!" When Zach tore off his calm disguise and revealed his towering rage, Daryl felt an unprecedented fear. It felt like he was locked up in a cage. At first, he didn't feel anything, but later on, he found out that the cage was filled with an evil aura, the kind that was especially brutal. At this time, his bones were finally not hard anymore. "Brother, I was wrong. Susie didn't die, did she? I apologized to her. I can even compensate her with some of my territory. Can you spare me? I promise, I won't take revenge on her. I'll be fine as long as I can live my old age overseas." Huh, you're asking for quite a lot. Asking to even enjoy your old age. How are you worthy of enjoying your old age? Just because you shot my friend in the back, do you think you have the right to enjoy your old age? Daryl, you think too much, don't you? Zach did not give Daryl the chance to speak anymore. He looked at Donnie and asked, "Is it cold?" Donnie nodded. "Cool enough. Good enough for multiple magazines." Only then did Daryl understand that Zach did not want to let him go. He just did not want the gun barrel to explode because it was too hot. Receiving the submachine gun, Zach pointed the gun at Daryl's armpit at this time. "I will break both arms and legs for you, and then send you to the hospital. Do you believe me?" Daryl nodded, but before he could say anything, Zach pulled the trigger again. More shots rang out, and each one that made contact added to Daryl's pain. Daryl also realized that his life was completely over. The thing he had provoked was not a human. It was a beast in human form. After 6 more bullets, Daryl's arms fell to the ground. At this moment, he only had one arm left. Using Zach's words, he said, "If you are willing to train, you can walk with your legs if you make it to the hospital in time. Doesn't this count as me being kind to you?" Daryl, who had lost too much blood, had a pale face. His forehead was covered with layers of cold sweat. Zach drew his gun and smashed it on Daryl's chin. Of course, what was broken was not the gun, but the jawbone of Daryl. The next moment, Zach waved his hand towards the door. "Throw Daryl out! Don't let anyone say our names, and don't let him see anyone he knows." Oh, right. He probably didn't want to hear other people's sarcastic remarks either. Just let him be a little kinder. Donnie nodded his head. He knew very well what Zach was trying to say, so he quickly asked the man and the gangster to carry Daryl out and throw him in the wagon. Whoever dares to touch my people, I will make them regret living in this world.
Because on top of that fridge now,
Episode 311. Case closed. On the third day after the junkyard incident, the two cities were in an uproar. Everyone knew what Daryl had done. His limbs were broken, and his sight, hearing, and taste were all gone. He had survived, but he had been completely crippled. All of this was rumored to have happened because of Susie. Because Susie had been shot, Daryl had been completely crippled. This sort of cripple was worse than death, because Daryl did not even have the right to want to die now. If he wanted to jump, he did not know where the building and the river were. He could not see. He wanted to understand what was happening in the outside world, but his eardrums were crippled. He could not hear any sound at all. Simply put, he was now stuck in his own body, without any way of ending it himself. In the same 3 days, the leaders of the two cities also received a video. The video showed how Daryl was crippled. In the video, besides Daryl, there was also a man in leather shoes. However, there were only 2 legs, 2 hands, and a gun. There was nothing else. There was also dialogue in the video, but they were silenced. Everyone could only compare Daryl's words with his mouth, and the comparison showed that he was begging for mercy. This video caused a huge panic on the streets, causing the bosses to be filled with fear for a moment. They were also very afraid that they would become the second Daryl. So during this period of time, there were many bosses who came to the hospital to visit Susie. If the evidence was conclusive enough, the police could even completely eliminate the criminals from the two cities. While the video caused the bosses to panic on the road, it was also given to the police. This was a very serious matter, especially when involved in such a violent and bloody crime. Thus, a special task force was set up. However, on the day the special task force was set up, 3 people came to the police force and reported the case to them. The content of the report was about this gun violence case, and they suspected that it was their own doing. That boss was brought back by the police on the same day. He was originally the most famous lackey under Daryl, and he was also the person who took over the crime organization after Daryl became crippled. The warm and comfortable throne was still not stable yet. The police came knocking on his door. Facing the charges of his boss's torture and multiple crimes his organization had committed, the new boss was especially anxious. He had never done this before, but he had others on his mind, so he obviously did not dare to meet the police. So before the police arrived, he ran away when he heard the news. However, whether it was the shoes or pants he left at home, they all matched very well with the video. Moreover, the MP7 submachine gun they found in his secret room had been compared to the bullet trajectory, the gun barrel, and the blood on the muzzle. All the evidence seemed to have pointed to him. There was nothing he could do to prove his innocence. This new boss was at a loss for words, and he didn't dare to argue back. All he wanted to do was to quickly escape overseas with the money he was squandering. However, his luck had just run out. An infamous intersection with many reported crashes. A large cement truck tipped over onto his vehicle. By the time crews could dig him out, his body was already cold. They used what they could to match his DNA and fingerprints to those found on the gun. Both were a complete match, without any leads to any other suspects. Therefore, the relevant investigators were quickly rewarded by the higher-ups. They were quick at handling cases, and they were good at solving cases. The little scandal that had just occurred in society was quickly resolved because of the successful solving of the case by the police. Daryl was dead. Daryl was killed by the number 1 lackey under his command. Now the lackey was dead as well. The entire territory was in chaos. The police took the opportunity to sweep the land on a large scale, clearing out some messy places. However, everyone on the streets knew that this matter was definitely not that simple. It was definitely not the work of Daryl's number 1 lackey. However, the truth was never based on speculation. That was why the people on the streets knew that it was related to Susie, but they did not have any evidence. The key was that they did not dare to speak nonsense now. They were afraid that if they spoke too much, they would never have the chance to speak again in this lifetime. Daryl's criminal empire came crashing down, and all his lower-level thugs were arrested. However, Zach didn't care about this anymore. He was now concerned about how Susie's injuries were recovering. When the doctor talked about this, he told Zach that Susie's injuries were not serious and that she had recovered very well. "I'll do another rehabilitation examination today. She can be discharged before noon." This good news made Zach heave a sigh of relief. He finally saw the light of hope that Susie was about to recover completely. When he returned to the ward, Zach told Susie this good news, and Susie looked especially happy. However, besides being happy, Zach also said to her, "Susie, it's too dangerous for you to stay on the road. I've thought about it, and I've thought about it. Why don't you go to my house and accompany Zena? Anyway, Zena is very bored over there." Susie shook her head and refused. "I'm not going. I don't like being restrained. I just like being free." This self-evaluation was really accurate and ruthless. Even Zach could not do anything about it. Susie advocated freedom. She definitely would not want to be the bird in the cage, and Zach could not force her on this point. "If you want to torture me, then continue to torture me. But there's one thing that you must not torture yourself to death." After the morning examination, Zach left the hospital with Susie and stayed in the most luxurious and clean hotel nearby. Susie said, "Why are you so fierce? You made Daryl look like that. Why not just kill him?" Zach was unhappy at that time. "Whoever dares to bully you, I will use the fiercest method to deal with him. I have to be fierce for everyone in the underworld to see. I can fight fair and square on the streets, but who dares to touch you? I want him to live a life worse than death." Susie knew that the reason Zach was so fierce was definitely to warn everyone in the underworld. Episode 312. Can't you be more serious? Zach stayed by Susie's side for the next half-month. However, Zach did not stay idle during this period of time. He instructed Donnie and the gangster to bring Susie's men with him to step on Daryl's previous territory. All those who did not listen to him and chose to resist were all ruthlessly punished. Worried that they did not have enough manpower, Donnie called out the people from the newly opened security company with Donovan. Soon, things calmed down. No matter whether it was the place where Susie's men were restless or the place Daryl left behind, it had now fallen into their hands. Everyone was obedient, and no one dared to oppose her anymore. A month later, the trial car was built, and Susie's injuries were almost healed. Before Zach left, he went to find Susie and once again suggested asking her to leave the dangerous world behind and choose his safety and protection. However, Susie did not accept this suggestion. "My heart is wild. I want to be outside." After Zach left Susie's side, he quickly arrived at the QZ group. The matter of the trial car had already started for a month now. He was so stunned that he only came a month later. But fortunately, Carson and Dr. Dusty were still here, so the trial and training of the car naturally wouldn't be delayed. After entering the trial workshop, Zach saw the offline, non-mass-produced trial car. The model was a compact car. The lines were very beautiful, and its appearance was very fashionable and grand. It could catch the eyes of young people. This exterior design was not designed by QZ. After all, it took a long time to design the exterior. All kinds of designs had to be verified for wind resistance and so on. It was not that easy. It was a waste of time. Zach did not want to wait for too long on this matter, so he bought the design of a foreign car company that was specifically designed and prepared to operate on a more efficient engine with plenty of room for modification. Dr. Dusty introduced the car and passed the keys to Zach, asking him to test it out. Zach took the keys and got into the car. The interior was not bad. They were all soft packaging structures. The functions of one key to start the car and automatically park the car were all the same. After the car started up, the soundproofing in the car was maintained quite well. Moreover, the starting speed of the converter was very stable and powerful. There were no problems with changing gears or delays during the acceleration process. After exiting the workshop and entering the test drive, Zach could wantonly ruin this test drive and release its power to his heart's content. At this time, the silver gray test car was like a fierce leopard in the test drive. There was no roaring sound, but it did not hinder the momentum and stability of the car after it had completely released its power. Whether it was the acceleration after drifting or the acceleration and deceleration during the smooth driving, it was very precise. It could be said that it was attacking wherever it wanted. Moreover, the feeling of being pushed back when speeding up was quite strong. It made this seemingly small car possess a fighting strength that was difficult to ignore. It was quite powerful. After getting out of the car, Zach was full of praise for the engine system of the car. Dr. Dusty was very proud. This was a car designed by his team. Of course, he had reason to be proud of it. He said to Zach, "The engine of this car is comparable to an AMG A45. This was indeed worthy of pride. Zach knew AMG A45 was a high-performance engine product. As a high-performance product developed by the Mercedes-Benz AMG department, AMG had completely cut off its relationship with home cars. Although it was only a 2.0 T-turbine engine, its power parameters reached the maximum output of 381 horsepower, and its peak torque was 475 Nm. Let's put it this way, the maximum output of any 3.0 double-turbine hydraulic engines was less than 300. It could be said that this engine was absolutely insane. Mercedes-Benz uses a larger turbine hydraulic transformer to increase the pressure value and the inflow to increase the engine's power output. Just like many modified vehicles, the hydraulic transformer can obtain greater power. However, the wear and tear on the engine is very serious," Dr. Dusty proudly introduced. "But our cars won't, because our hydrogen power itself is strong, and in the later stages, we can make better and better adjustments. If we want to fight at the level of 2.0 T, we can kill them all after adjusting our engines." Speaking of this, Dr. Dusty's face was full of pride. It could be seen that he was quite proud of this car's power system. However, he did not have the capital to do so. The hydrogen energy was used as a power source. It was a very powerful power system. "Yes, but the power system of a normal listed vehicle is too strong. The car can't carry it, so it still needs to be low-powered. Its strength is absolutely invincible. However, this car is limited by cost and household design, so it doesn't have enough weight." When Zach had been having fun earlier, he noticed that the car was a little floaty. It meant that if he continued to step on the accelerator, the car would fly. However, it was hard to tell where the car would go after flying. For a home car, this was definitely a design flaw that would cause safety hazards. When Zach mentioned this, Dr. Dusty felt a little depressed. It seemed that he could not let the engine display its strongest combat strength, which made him a little disappointed. The next moment, Zach's words ignited his fighting spirit.